vida volverá. Triste pena, ya dejemos ya.
San Antonio. Well, you know, this past Thanksgiving is sort of my prayers were sort of answered. I don't know if anybody got to see, Mr. Emmett Smith there speak, but there was sort of the work that I had been doing with my Veterans for Education Reform and some of the reviews as a research analyst on the reports that were coming in. And what he had said that day on Remembering the 22 was actually the case study I did on the Department of Veterans Affairs 2012 suicide report that showed that we're losing 22 of our veterans every day. I'm a veteran myself. You know, I had, back in, I won't say how old I am, so I'm not going to bring that up, but I had taken the oath to uphold the prosperity, of our nation and also to defend the Constitution, our freedoms. And when I was sitting there watching the Remember 22 special that Emmett did, and I thought, well, I'm going to bring this back to the citizens and try to get what we did in the mission statement there back in 2012 when Texas was identified as Texas National Guard, and Governor Perry appointed to Captain Hunter Smith there at Camp Mayberry, where that second rate of suicide was the highest. I think it was in Seattle, was the highest on the review of the report. And that's when we pushed for the Veterans Court, because it showed the 50 to 59 kept recidifying in the judicial, and there wasn't a lifeline for them to identify. What we went to and spoke with Captain Smith, our Veterans for Education Reform group, and asked him if he could reference to the use of psychotropics. And he said no, he got the appointment for post-traumatic stress disorder. And last year in August, I had gone to speak on post-traumatic stress disorder to bring the awareness of what we had found now that was identified as the cause of suicide, psychotropics. And now that it was being discussed and brought into it, at that time, it couldn't. But when I went there to speak, President Obama gave $75 million for police brutality, but I was there to speak on post-traumatic stress disorder because our former President Bush, and which actually he did here in 2015, started the campaign of saying there's no such thing as post-traumatic stress disorder in the military. And I don't know what that's going to do. He's changed it around to where now they're saying it's a post-traumatic stress syndrome, which isn't going to be fair for our men, and that's why I'm going to keep on to my mission here. And I've worked at creating the ESP project. And but I want you to watch what he says here, because this is so important for us to realize that PTSD is causing suicide. And then for a former president that led us into this conflict to where now our nation is in need. And I'm hoping the ESP project, with your support and with taking it to legislation as far as some of the things that were done when Governor Perry identified the need there at Camp Mayberry and appointed Captain Smith. So let me let you watch this, and I'll bring you back to my mission as far as the ESP project.
I think people definitely identify myself with the number 22. It's been a number that has grown with me. I've grown with it. And it definitely takes on a whole new meaning on Thanksgiving. When Chris Dolman first brought Remember the 22 to me, I was trying to get an understanding of what it was all about. The one thing I absolutely love about our sport is it's all about teamwork. And it's the same for our veterans as well.
All over this land, we built monuments to honor fallen heroes and recognize the sacrifices they made on foreign soil. But what about the ones who come home? Remembering the 22 is not just a tribute, it's a cause. 22 veterans take their own lives every day. That's a number none of us can live with.
Our military, for me, is those guys are my heroes.
Chad Alcox, I served in the Marine Corps from 2003 to 2007.
Sergeant Andy Chorley. I did 2 tours.
Jeremy Caldwell, United States Army, retired medic. I signed up pre-September 11. My basic thing was I wanted to get the heck out of Colorado as fast as I could.
There's nothing I ever wanted to do with my life besides be a soldier.
You don't fight for yourself. If you fight for yourself over there, people are going to get killed. You fight for one another.
Being a medic, you know that your job revolves around the life and death of people. But there's no one I've ever met who's ready for the scope of what we dealt with in Iraq and Afghanistan.
When they join the military, they're trained for war. They're not trained to come home.
You leave part of your mind over there. You leave part of your soul over there. So we have to continue fighting this fight here.
There's a lot of soldiers that have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress syndrome, and they find their way of dealing with this either through alcohol, drugs, which leads into more depression.
Isolation is absolutely toxic for an individual suffering from combat stress or post-traumatic stress disorder. It isolates them from society, their family, their friends.
They become fixated on what they should have done better, what they could have done different.
You feel like you're worthless. You just want to give up.
You're ready to quit, and you're like, there's this easy road out.
I was tired of losing brothers. I was tired of seeing little kids that were my kids' age, dying. And I went and put a gun in my mouth. But couldn't get myself to pull the trigger, and I'm to the point now where I don't want to go back to that darkness, but I'm tired of watching friends go to that darkness.
After getting out and attempting suicide, I didn't realize how it would affect the people around me. It's one of the most selfish things you can possibly do, because you're ending your life, so you're coming up with a long-term solution to a temporary problem, but you're giving everybody else around you a nightmare for the rest of their lives.
22 a day is it's not just a number that someone drew up. I mean, you've got 20 plus people, pictures. They all have stories. Sorry. They all have stories. They all have people that love them who don't have them.
Everybody has a story to be told, and everybody has something great in them. Your story is out there. You can still tell your story. And to be able to tell your story could save the life of somebody.
What's up? What's going on? What's going on? Good.
I seen you the other day. Remember, the 22 is an opportunity now. Our goals are being able to get guys out of their homes, get them into things that they enjoy.
You get with an organization like this, and you're able to go out fishing and hunting.
It's more the camaraderie.
It's really getting the veterans around other veterans again. We got through war by helping one another. We got to get through back home by helping one another.
I deal with PTSD issues, and just to get back in the natural society, it's difficult.
You don't have to be a Hall of Famer. You don't have to wear the number 22. You just got to have a heart for people, a heart for life.
In the military, no one gets left behind, and this is just a case of that. No one needs to get left behind.
If we don't remember the 22, then everything's for nothing.
I think a lot of men and women forget what to be thankful for when they're in a dark place. But it's important to understand the good things and pick out the good things.
Today's not the end of the story. And if you keep going, then you'll get to a good place.
Some days you don't understand how worth it is until, I walk through my front door and I have my curly-headed 8-year-old bounding down the stairs and jumping into my arms. Those things seem minuscule in everyday life until you realize that I almost never saw those things again.
It's our purpose to be the key to help them learn how to be home again and to be thankful for what we can do rather than focus on what we can't is when we can truly make a difference. And for that, we should be thankful.
So when have this now brought to the nation and the coming together, this is why our ESP project on some of the other reports that I've worked on as far as this crisis in America, I talked to a lot of the guys that were held in Brumsfeld and, do a peer-to-peer here and worked with San Antonio's Coalition of Veterans and Families and a young lady, her husband, I think I had her on my show earlier in the year. Her husband was a peer-to-peer worker, as I was, and he lost his serviceman and ended up getting depressed and went to the VA and asked for, because he had gotten depressed, and they had put him on some type of antidepressant. And he ended up committing suicide. I still remember she said that he called her, and she didn't answer, and she's got to live with that, but. That's sort of keeping me on my mission, as far as my mission continuing and some of the other reports I've done and the work that I did as the founder of a Father's Initiative that started back when I had joined and they had chemically altered my son's mind when I went there at the Cindy Taylor Cryer Center in San Antonio that they're covering up here in Bexar County, they're covering up in legislation by not wanting to say what they're doing to the children in the juvenile system. Back in 2002, there was two young ladies I was honored to join forces with. Two angels were sent to end the molestation and what they were doing to the kids in the juvenile system. It was TYC then. It's no longer TYC after the work they've done. And I'm honored to have Mary Jane and Diana's. Two of the warriors on this war of injustice against the indigent or indigenous, because we're Native Americans. Actually, all three of us are. And as far as the coming together on wanting to make the changes and why I've authored the ESP project. But she went to legislation and brought the awareness with Senator Hinojosa. They even had the attorneys, as they had in my son's case in 2009, with Mrs. Wilkerson and her group and David Riley and all of them, on the same thing that was becoming what we're trying to bring this to you on why, on the review, on the reports closer to home, 2007 she had testified and what she had said there for those children made great changes and bills were passed. And I have all the information if you guys want it. I can get you all that. And we tried to keep that in there even when I had gone back in 2013 with Senator Vanderpute when we had worked to advocate for what they had did to my son. He was trying to help the kids that were medicated. And the mod leaders or the veterans or the guys that work in the facilities didn't really have or couldn't help them because they don't know how to help someone that's withdrawing from psychotropics. And when he asked him to get the ambulance, they jumped him and put him in isolation himself and put him in restraints and told him he's not getting out until he takes what almost killed him. They put him on a drug called Prozac. And thank God for Charlie Gonzalez, he got my son out of there. I still remember Judge Mialis telling me that I needed to step back. I told him, it's my son, you almost killed him, But yeah, that was 2009 Father's Day, and I've continued on and was blessed to be given the report and start working with, because that bill that we did with Senator Vanderpute was SB 1356. Governor Perry signed that bill. It ended the torturing of children, the Texas Juvenile Justice Department. And that's when Captain Hunter Smith got the appointment for post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's because I had did the 2012 DVA report. I thought it was important to go and ask what a lot of the guys were saying, you know, when they come back from Rumsfeld, you know, they're still dealing with it and coming back, you know, as my son did, the flashbacks and the, you know, sweating and, you know, just, I guess your mind sort of wants to blank it out, you know, and you're killing children or just, you know, or a lot of the guys were on it was dumbfounded, they're on a drug, painkiller called Oxycontin. And when we looked into Oxycontin, it was actually subsidized by the Bushes, Bush Senior, and as a commodity, which is now the #1 addictive drug in the world. And I just can't see how we're, you know, keep going for this profits, I guess. But now that this has happened, this Thanksgiving here with the Remember 22, this is going to be a national push to where what I've tried to say in the Texas Juvenile Justice Department is not want to accept what was in the report closer to home by the Council of State Governments and the advocacy work I did back in 2010 for the Andy Casey Foundation. It was Mr. Lubar, Bart Lubar came for the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative, and he'd given a PowerPoint there for the practitioners here in San Antonio, and they didn't adopt. So when I did the assessment here at the Advocates, you know, 7 single-parent moms and myself, and then 2 sets of parents, and you know, the one young man, he had been put on a drug and ended up killing his psychotropic, ended up killing his father, and we had to help his mom, you know, bury him. But I went to advocate for him. He was going to the juvenile judge, Lisa Jarrett, here in San Antonio, and she was going to make the decision on whether he needed to be bound over as an adult. And I thought, well, you know, if you altered the kid's mind with psychotropics, someone, and not being able to accept the liabilities to process them in, you send them home. Where's the liability at? And I think this kid got, you know, 25 to life. You know, it's just like nobody wanted to listen. But yet the facts are now, you know, because the lies end, like Mr. Tejeda said, Louis Tejeda, you know, he's a good friend of mine, and Frank Tejeda's cousin. And he said, all the lies will end. This is what his father used to tell him. And Frank, when someone tells the truth, and this is what's going to eventually come around to where, you know, we can be cleansed and sort of start healing again, you know, as far as working towards a more prosperous America. And as I had said, you know, I too had taken an oath as a United States Navy veteran. You know, I'm disabled, but, you know, my mind isn't, and I'm going to keep pushing forward. And I'm going to ask to meet with the governor on what I had worked on with our group. It's the ESP project. You know, in this report closer to home, the state of Texas Juvenile Justice Department was identified with the highest rate of recidivism in all the United States. And I tried to go and have our language included as we had advocated for the restraints and isolation with Senator Vanderpute and SB 1356. And Senator John Whitmire, who's part of the work with Mary Jane and Diane, when Senator Hinojosa blessed her, and, you know, of course, Senator Whitmire was there in support of her. And, you know, this session here in February, which I tried to get our Senator Jose Menendez to acknowledge that, you know, this is the time for the change. You know, with this report closer to home by the Council of State Governments that was funded by the Andy Casey Foundation, showing Texas's recidivism rate as being 54% statewide. And so that'll mean that whatever they're doing, and that's why I went, because, you know, they did it to my son, is causing 54% of the kids to recidify into the adult system, meaning whatever they're doing to the kids as far as the Texas Juvenile Justice Department, which was formerly the Texas Youth Commission, as to when Mary Jane founded the Texas Families for Incarcerated Youth, and still here today for the children, as, you know, I am, and what now I'm asking, or will go to ask Governor Greg Abbott, that we create the ESP project for our veterans to help heal those young men and women, but create a new course on what Dr. McCarthy, or Mr. McCarthy, the president and CEO, had said on my last show, that, you know, it's time for change in America, and you know, these are America's children. And now that it's all been identified, I don't think anybody can keep steering away from this, but they did. You know, they wouldn't add our case study, wouldn't add our language, and that's why, you know, I spent all this time, and I figured, God, you have me here, somebody in the higher power for these children. As far as Senator Whitmire did a bill 1630, and we tried to put our case study there, and he said, well, let's get them closer to home. They're indigent children. That's not what's causing these kids to kill their fathers. That's not what's causing them to abuse their children. Even in the the San Antonio Police Department's Child Abuse Report 2015, after the review, I took it to Senator Menendez and asked him, look, it's showing here that mothers or young men and women are hurting their children because they're crying. But when I looked into and asked some of those, were they ever in the juvenile system on any type of antidepressant or psychotropic, and you know, a high rate of them said yeah. And so this is in 2015, but you know, Tara, Lance, and you know, Senator Whitmire's office wouldn't add my case study. I said, well, it's not to add my case study, you know, and that's why I wanted to bring to the Remember 22 group and the rest of y'all, and what happened here in Texas back in 2013. You know, we did end the torturing of children in our juvenile system. You know, they're not going to do that any longer, or restraints and isolation. But, you know, I remember seeing or working with Dr. Michael Gilbert when Tommy Atkinson started the advocacy work for monitoring what was going on in San Antonio's transfer facility, and as far as the mental health crisis of our veterans. You know, that lifeline finally getting in there and you know, saving some of these guys, but they still have the restraints and isolation in the adult facilities. This is torture. And we're that society as far as what is being discussed now. You know, I got to start in with a group. It's law enforcement leaders of the 130 law enforcement leaders on a reform President Obama is doing on crime and incarceration. That group's going to be really important on the sort of creating the nucleus, but the ESP project I'm going to push forward with. I know Governor Abbott's going to help me with this change because, you know, San Antonio is Military City, USA, and we can do this. Our veterans can help mentor the young men and women that the Texas Juvenile Justice Department, that has a $340 million budget, is processing over 54% of the kids into the adult. I don't know if it's a private penal system or why it's being fed that way. You know, just last year, or no, it was this year, there was a judge that was actually feeding the kids from the juvenile into the juvenile facilities. I think he ended up getting 28 years. It was so blatant. But as to the covering up of it, or why they didn't want to add the language, I'm a veteran. I'm a United States veteran. And what you're doing to children in Texas needs to be addressed. But what's real, real important here, and I want you to understand this, on September 1st, former Texas Governor Rick Perry, on September 1st, he signed a bill that was authored by a state representative at the time. It was Lois Colkhurst out of Brennan, Texas. Now this is because I think it was September the 9th and September the 25th when we got down to Giddings State School. And you go online, it's all there. They had a riot, and the kids were up on the roof, but you know, some of the kids crying. You could see they were altered, and they were threatening to jump, and I'm thinking like, You know, they're in a circle, though, you know, like little kids in kindergarten and crying. And I'm thinking, like, man, these are children. But former Governor Perry signed HB 915 that Senator Holkhurst, and I'm going to ask her to defend that as the cause of suicide. That day in America, former Governor Rick Perry identified what we all need to know. And that was done in the Texas foster care system. Now we're asking that identity of those psychotropics, because I just called and I talked to Lawrence yesterday in Senator Whitmire's office. Are you guys still using psychotropics in the Texas Juvenile Justice Department? Is that chemically altering a child's mind? You know, that's what they did to my son. And I went and saw him and took his daughter with them. They made him plead guilty. The day his daughter was born, you know, he said he took somebody's food, and they gave him 12 years. And I'm going to keep on my mission and bring this, you know, to Governor Abbott. Greg Abbott, I know, is going to make the change for our veterans and for our indigent children in Texas, is what Senator Whitmire said in his bill, but would not add what Governor Perry said. You know, former Governor Perry signed it. And I know that I'm going to put a petition and march up to see Governor Abbott on the ESP project. The ESP project is building Earthen Solar Poly homes as a curriculum. If we're having trouble with kids on that school to prison pipeline that's been here and getting funds but not ending, I will end it with our veterans being the force that mentors these young men and women to start building Earthen Solar Poly homes. I've had the Navajo Nation, Mr. Jitter from Earthen, Mr. Lanny Zinkin, Solar San Antonio, to work towards ending youth imprisonment, and says he's a partner, he's ready to go. So I'm going to push forward. This is my mission, that the ESP project joins forces with Remember the 22, and our veterans become the mentors to end the imprisonment of American children. These are our children. This is what's supposed to be our future, and we're letting a system of justice. I don't know how, you know, because it does say the Texas Juvenile Justice Department doing this to where 54% in the report are going. And that's a lie, because in my assessment, 2010, San Antonio, when the young man killed his father and Lisa Jarrett bound him over, and now he's doing life, it was 70%. So that means the city of San Antonio has the highest rate of recidivism in the United States of America. So God bless you, and God bless the indigent children. And I'm praying we all come together and make the change that he has me on my mission for. So my mission is going to continue, and I'm going to march to see Governor Abbott. And God bless you.
Yo sé que un día volverá. Esta pena ya déjalo ya. Yo sé que un día volverá.